Hi, my name's Rachel and today we're talking about Vicious by V.E. Schwab. This came out several years ago now and it is well loved, and all I knew about it is that it's about two guys, Victor and Eli, and it's about superheroes and supervillains, and it's kind of dark. That's all I knew going in. And that Eli and Victor were friends and then they had a bit of a falling out, which is the understatement of the year. This video was requested by Lex. I cannot thank Lex enough for requesting this and the sequel, which I am 20% into, because Vicious is a book that I gave 5 stars to. One of the best things that I have probably ever read, especially in the subgenre of like dark superhero, supervillain fiction. I have been chasing the high that was heroes for a long time, and sometimes things have scratched that itch, such as Kick-Ass. I'm also a big fan of DC, so I really like the show Young Justice. I named my cats after characters from Young Justice and other DC things, but I am a huge fan of, I really like comics. I don't read them enough. I really like superhero, supervillain books in prose because you get to go into the details of like the gritty, dark part so much more. I love comics like Batman Hush for its darkness and its themes and its character work, but something about prose just really highlights all of those like deliciously dark details and talking about the human experience and how we're all like one bad choice away from being the next bad guy. And V.E. Schwab's prose in particular is perfect for this. You can learn an awful lot from the folks who write in this incredible subgenre of like superhero, supervillain fiction about how to write something dark and suspenseful like this. And this brings me to today's sponsor, which is Skillshare. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with a wide variety of topics for you to be able to learn about and take your hobby or your side hustle to the next level. Illustration, cooking, video editing, productivity, and yes, writing. In order to have a better understanding of writing superhero, supervillain fiction and suspenseful stories about them, I really recommend this class that I took from Benjamin Percy called Writing Suspense: How to Write Stories That Thrill in Any Genre. Percy has actually written Batman comics, so I trust him to help me understand better the suspense aspect of hero and villain stories. And he explains using tools like temporary blindness and triangulation in order to get your audience really feeling the suspense like I was feeling while reading Vicious. Suspense is a tool, and you take what you learn from this class, the tricks of writing suspense, and wield this tool properly, and then you have a story like Vicious that withstands the test of time and still brings in new readers ready to sit on the edge of their seat, terrified about what Eli and Victor are gonna do next to each other. But it's not just writing. You can find a class that will teach you the skills to master whatever craft you want to excel with Skillshare. The first 500 people to click my link below or use the QR code here will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. You can get started today. You can find the key to writing a suspenseful story, or learn watercolor painting, or nail a recipe for burgers, or learn video editing like I do here. You can learn all of that with Skillshare. So click that link below to get started today, and thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. I'm gonna do this in a non-spoilery section and then a kind of like spoilery feelings dump that is not very structured. So I want to talk about the themes. I want to talk about why I think this was so well received is a good way to describe this. Like, people really loved this book. And then later, if you want spoilers, I'll talk about what actually, like the spoilery parts of the book later. So Vicious by V.E. Schwab is a reimagining of the superhero genre, sort of. I mean, it's something different in the superhero genre, I feel. Now, I love superhero books. I have read this comic book, which is like your kind of standard superhero story. And then I also really liked Marissa, what is her name? The Renegades trilogy. Carlos and I read the whole thing and we highly recommend it. I love it if you love a little bit dark, but it's also young adult. So it's a little bit more hopeful than adult narratives about heroes and villains like Vicious is not very hopeful, which is fine. I don't need it to be hopeful. Again, I really like Batman Hush. I've read a lot of Batman comics. I've read some Marvel stuff too, but I really prefer DC, Batman in particular. I'm a huge fan of Dick Grayson. I love comic books. I named my kid after a comic book character in part. I love superhero stories, especially darker ones. So I should have known that this book would already be up my alley. I don't know why I didn't read it sooner, to be honest. But it's more than just a book about heroes and villains. It's about the characters. It's really, the character work is the meat of what we're doing here, not so much the plot. And V.E. Schwab's really good at that. That is what she excels at. She writes these very complex characters, heavy on the moral ambiguity, and she focuses on the consequence of having power. There's this conversation here, this very nuanced conversation about what it means to be human, and especially a superhuman. The novel presents this world that really challenges you to consider or reconsider your preconceived notions of like hero and villainy. So if you've only read things like Renegades up to this point, this is like sort of like a stepping stone into like how dark things would actually be. Similar to like, what's that TV show, The Boys? It's kind of like that. So the synopsis is basically that Eli and Victor Vale, they were in college together and they both had to present an idea for a thesis. They decided, well, Eli really had this idea that he was excited about to prove that near-death experiences in particular can bring out superhuman abilities in people. And this is sort of like kept under wraps, like people don't really know that people with superhuman abilities exist, and there's an entire police force dedicated to sort of like keeping this under wraps. You're sort of misled, which I think that this is like a really good example of Benjamin Percy's idea on temporary blindness, how we're so focused on Victor and Victor's thoughts on things that we are not noticing that Eli is also kind of a bad dude. Neither of these people are heroes. This isn't like hero versus villain. This is like bad guy versus bad guy. And like sometimes Victor makes the right choices, but a lot of the time he doesn't. And often when he's making the right choice, he's doing things as a means to his own end. If you want to talk about like moral grayness, if there was moral gray in the dictionary, Victor Vale's face would be next to it. Well, Victor does end up getting his abilities and something goes terribly wrong. This creates a split between him and Eli. That is putting it so mildly, because I still feel like I'm giving Eli way too much credit by describing it that way. 10 years later, Victor has broken out of jail and Eli has been on a crusade to kill every other superpowered person. And Victor's like, I'm gonna get revenge because Eli fucked me over. And also, I guess I don't think he should be killing other people, but mostly I just want my revenge. And so then he takes on this small team of people to help him track down and get rid of Eli. This book really effectively plays with a non-linear timeline, especially in the beginning, which is common for like suspenseful stories and for superhero stories, or superhero, supervillain. We're gonna call it hero-villain stories. Schwab is a super skilled writer, not just like making beautiful prose where the sentence not only sounds pretty but makes sense. I think you guys have heard me complain over and over about how people are sacrificing things making sense for sounding pretty. And I never felt like, okay, get on with it. Like, her prose is so good. It really makes you hang on her every word. And I think that this was done, like this book in general was done very efficiently. Nothing seems like to excess, even while we were getting flashbacks, which does happen in other books where there are flashback scenes. I'm like, oh, I actually don't feel like I need to care about this. I don't feel like I need to be here. But this book is playing with a non-linear timeline where it's not just flashbacks to like one person or one time. All of those are given to us in like a specific order that really amps up the suspense. And they were giving like really beautiful context to characters that she already had made us very quickly attached to. Because this isn't just about Victor and Eli. We get third-person POVs from several people, and they're all involved in what's going on between Victor and Eli. Everybody sort of gets involved or caught in the crosshairs. And even like the really bad people, like Eli's a bad person, other people that Eli's involved with are bad people. They're still nuanced, and I was still very interested in seeing what was happening to them, like what makes them tick. You know, that actually sounds a lot like this is Siler from Heroes, where, you know, he just like wanted to know the inner workings, how it worked. That's me, but like in a not bad guy way. It is important to note that there are basically no good people in this book besides Sydney and her dog. There is a dog. Does the dog die? Yes, but the dog also comes back to life. So it's important to you that the dog stay alive. Technically, the dog stays alive. So I think the really smart thing that V.E. Schwab did at the beginning of this book is, even though you know that it's sort of going to be a rivalry between Victor and Eli, you are getting these ideas about Victor's perception of Eli that makes it sound like Eli is a lot better of a person than Victor is. Victor has a lot of jealousy towards Eli, and I think that there's almost like a curiosity about Eli's more moral, better behavior, or at least the perception from Victor's point of view about Eli being a better person than he is. Not in an envious way, but in a curiosity kind of way. But Victor does envy Eli because this goodness about Eli does afford Eli more stuff that Victor does want. So for instance, Eli is in a relationship with Angie at the beginning of this book, and there's a bit of Victor that in a way is jealous because he and Angie knew each other first at school, and then Eli came in and Angie was enamored with Eli. But in a way, he's also jealous of Angie because he says that Angie has undone Eli's focus after Victor worked so hard to bring it out, as in like academically. And the book says just like that, he lost them both when they came together. And the book, I mean, it really focuses in on this Victor's perception of Eli at the beginning in a way that made me like second guess what was coming, even though I knew that Eli is not good, that both of them are bad. But it really focuses in on Victor's thought process, even though it's written in third. You really get a glimpse into the inner workings of Victor's mind in particular. It says that he had this desire to pen over Eli's life and write it as his. Victor is also very manipulative. He thinks about how he has to behave in order to be perceived a certain way. So when Eli brings to Victor's attention this thesis idea of near-death experiences bringing out a superhuman ability, Victor has to act like he's not interested, even though he's very eager, he thinks to himself. So they have this conversation about how to do this, right? And at first, Eli's thinking, this is all theoretical, Victor. And again, you have to wonder, like, was Eli always this way, or did Victor make him worse? In my opinion, I think that Eli was always this way. And what's really fun for me is that Eli, his morality, his desire to kill other superpowered people comes from a religious belief that he grew up with. I believe his father was a pastor or a preacher. So he has this like ingrained religious issue that only gets worse after they start this process of trying to prove this thesis of near-death experiences will bring out superhuman abilities in humans. And you have to wonder like what Eli's POV was when Victor was thinking like, oh, I have to manipulate this situation. I'm really interested. I can't seem too interested in this situation. Eli's such a better person than me. And he's trying to explain to Eli, Victor, is that, you still have too many variables, even if you think about just doing like putting people in a position where you would have them experience a trauma. That's not specific enough. It has to be a near-death experience. But even then, you still have too many variables, and Eli is receiving this information, and Victor's trying to explain it to him with like very much nonchalance, but inwardly he's very frustrated that he did not think of any of this first, and he feels like this is another thing that Eli gets that Victor does not get. He's equally jealous and in awe of Eli. So, of course, Victor is spouting off on all of these, theories and things, trying to seem, nonchalant. But Eli says to him, this is all theoretical, Victor. And I wonder how much, like, I really want to see the inner workings of Eli's brain now, having finished it, because it really did a good job convincing me at the beginning that Victor was the problem, even though you know that Eli is bad reading the synopsis. So what we're doing with this setup, this, how can we test out NDAs on people to bring out superhuman abilities, and how that led to Eli feeling like actually superhuman abilities are evil. So we're doing, the theme of ambition on Victor's side versus morality on Eli's side, and the nature of power through the lens of these two college friends, this strong bond between these two young men who turned into very bitter enemies. I feel like this is just a book with like profound examination of what it means to be heroic and villainous, and how it is not black and white, and you always live in the gray in those things. And there's a lot to be said for like similarities between Victor and Eli, despite the fact that Victor feels like he's like night and day in the beginning, night and day different than Eli. He's not as good as Eli, and he like desperately wants to be, to the point of like it being a little bit sinister. These are both exceptionally intelligent men. They're very ambitious. They're very driven by this desire to prove themselves. They share this deep passion for science and unanswered questions in the scientific realm. So then they both gain superhuman abilities through their research, and the routes they take have parallels but are so different. And I think it was a lot for Victor to grapple with, thinking that Eli was this like wholly good human, and then seeing how it's almost like Victor was it's like begrudgingly like, well, now I have to sort of do the right, not always good, the right thing to clean up Eli's mess. And he doesn't really need to. It is entirely personal vendetta. But then along the way, he does end up needing to save certain people that Eli has put in grave danger. So both of these characters exist in this obvious, like, moral gray center. But funnily enough, like, Victor would have never anticipated this, but Victor more so than Eli. And they each are justifying their actions based on personal codes. This blurs the line between, like, right and wrong. And what's great about it is that in Eli's case, the motivation stems from something that is, like, very personal to me. So he's very troubling, but he's very relatable. And Victor, I just really enjoy watching, like, his desire for recognition, but also not wanting to seem too eager, turn into this absolute mess where he was so amazed by Eli only for it to turn into this disaster where he is now out to kill Eli for what he has done, what they set down this path. And I think that Victor probably thinks, if I had never pushed this, we would never have been here. Or is that still giving Eli too much benefit of the doubt and would it have happened anyway? And the antagonistic relationship between them is mostly like in Victor's POV. Eli doesn't really think about him, which I think pisses Victor off more. Because Eli is really driven by this like messianic complex he has. He really thinks of himself as a savior, undoing this wrong that he dabbled with. He himself became a superhuman, but through the process of becoming a superhuman, he was like, this is actually bad, horrible, dirty, immoral. And now he sees himself on this like very self-righteous path of doing like the ultimate good by taking out these immoral beings. But Victor's not a good person either. He is ultimately driven by revenge. He feels very abandoned. He feels very much the need to prove himself, but he's also a guy who deals with super dark impulses. And what's surprising is, like, in contrast to the beginning, Victor is ultimately more emotionally vulnerable than Eli is. So you set up this guy who's kind of an asshole, and then he's the one you end up empathizing with. Whereas Eli is portrayed in the beginning as more soft and personable, but it turns out he's like this morally superior in his point of view person with this like very rigid personality, which is rooted in like his superiority. And he does not bend, and this makes him more dangerous. He does not care. But what's interesting is he sees himself as doing something heroic, doing very necessary work. So it's really interesting watching both Victor and Eli's abilities lead them both down dark paths, showing how power can exacerbate existing flaws that we have, which is sort of like flipping the whole idea of like the traditional like nice superhero thing on its head, where it's like, now I have this greater sense of justice now that I have this power. Victor and Eli are both anti-heroes. Their choices lead to great pain and loss and destruction, and they would say this is necessary. Both of them would. I wonder if Victor ever ruminates, I say as if he's a real person, ever ruminates on how different he really is than Eli. But I think that because Victor does surround himself with other people that he does in some way care about, he probably justifies, everything that he does. It's a really good book. It's a really fascinating book. I hope that you will try it out. I absolutely loved it. I gave it 5 stars. The sequel, I'm having a little bit of trouble with feeling the same way I did with this first initial book, but I am going to finish it. These are very quick reads, like because they keep you so just in a state of suspense all the time because you're so worried about like these dudes are volatile. You never know what they're going to do next. And it is really fascinating to watch, but you are like, I was biting my nails off. I was very nervous reading this because I did not, and not even because I was like worried that something would happen to Victor. There's a side character, a young girl named Sydney. I was very worried about what would happen to her and her dog. And also there's another guy named Mitch who hangs out with Victor. I was worried about Mitch as well because he's just like a soft cinnamon roll. But mostly you see Victor and Eli, and I was just constantly on edge thinking that Victor and Eli were going to do something terrible to somebody all the time. Each other, somebody else, I don't know. It's a great first book. The first book is great for sitting in that suspense. The second one I'm having a little trouble finding my footing, but it's still great writing. Victoria really knows how to write a sentence, which is so different than so much of what I've been reading lately. So many sentences I'm like, what do you mean? I just read a romantasy that says, let me give you the Cliff Notes version. Cliff Notes? Cliff Notes? Ah! So this was like a breath of fresh air. If you want to stay for spoilers, this is the part where I'm sort of just going to like dump on you what happened in my rambly thoughts about it. I don't have any notes. So again, I feel like the flashbacks were so powerfully used here. I was never feeling like, get a move on, get on with it. I liked when we would flashback, which is very rare and very hard to do because a lot of, that's a skill that's very hard to master. Like if I tried to write a book, I probably couldn't do it either. Eli was abused when he was younger, and that has a lot to do with what was going on. Specifically, his dad was religious, and I was like, oh, well, that's relatable. And Victor had an upbringing that was like very, his parents are distant. They're famous authors. Like people are like, oh, your parents are so-and-so. And they just like do not really care to interact with Victor. So obviously like this has a lot to do with how they end up where they are, which is something I think about all the time. I remember reading somewhere like, you are not your parents, you know, whoever you are is a decision you made. And I'm like, I mean, in a way, yes, but like who we are, the things that we experience as a kid very much color like the way that we avoid or give in or dabble in certain situations. So of course, Victor feels like he has to approach everything like he doesn't care, even when he does actually care about things. So he very much wants to get involved with this near-death experience stuff. So first, Victor tries to be the first test subject. He overdoses on pills. Hi, the sentence that I meant to say here and then did not verbalize was, it doesn't work. Victor fails to fully have like the death part of the experience and then come back to life. And then that's what unlocks the powers, and Victor does not do that. Okay. Eli ends up doing a near-death experience where he submerges himself in an ice bath. He's dead. Victor brings him back to life, and Eli has the power to heal, which when you juxtapose that with the amount of destruction that Eli does is bonkers. He can only heal himself though, so in order to take Eli out, you would have to, I think you have to decapitate him, right? I don't remember. Honestly, in book 2, it's been a while since we've seen Eli. He doesn't really come on page yet, and I'm like 25% in. Victor wants to try again to get his own powers, and Eli refuses. And now thinking back, I'm like, this feels kind of sinister. I wonder how soon after, like if things had gone differently, I wonder how soon Eli would have killed Victor. So Victor enlists the help of Angie, which is Eli's girlfriend. She electrocutes Victor. Victor dies. He comes back to life and he accidentally kills Angie. His power is the power to cause pain. So Victor calls Eli, the only other person who knows about all this. He's like, Angie's dead, there was an accident. And Eli calls the police. And there's this guy named Detective Stell who like particularly gets called whenever there's like a superhero thing, because this is sort of kept under wraps from society at large. And like the initial, oh, okay, Eli called the police on Victor is like red flag, but I still was so thoroughly convinced that I had just misunderstood the synopsis and everything I'd heard about this book until Eli shoots Victor when they finally meet back up, and then ends up killing the professor that they had told about Eli's thesis so that the idea for the thesis can never be released. And then I was like, oh, you are deeply unwell. You have been very much doing naughty things and I did not see it. Oh, so you're a bad dude. Because he thinks that these people are unnatural. And him being religious, this just really, it hits for me. And then Eli ends up trying to kill a girl named Serena, and he can't because Serena can make people do what she tells them to do, make them believe what she says. And Serena was so fascinating. It was really heartbreaking that she came to the conclusion that people with powers are bad and they're not the same person they were anymore. So this ended up affecting how she treated her own younger sister, Sydney, who ends up, Eli tries to kill Sydney, and Serena like serves up Sydney on a platter to be killed by Eli, and I was heartbroken for her. Well, Sydney gets away. Sydney can raise people from the dead, so now we have necromancy, so obviously you can see why this is kind of my shit. Serena and Sydney had died because they'd fallen through the ice on a lake, and they both died. They came back at the hospital. Eli and Serena assumed that Sydney is dead. He shot at her, and they thought that she was dead, but she got away. She's only like 11 years old. Well, Sydney and Victor come across each other because Sydney was on the run, and Victor is looking for people. He's trying to find people in the present after he has broken out of prison with the help of Mitch, who's like this total cinnamon roll guy. He takes in Sydney. He realizes, okay, she can raise the dead. This is very helpful to me. Anybody that Eli kills, I can bring them back. I can have them give me information. And now Eli and Serena are working with Detective Stell, the police guy who investigates the superpowered people. So now he has access to all information on superpowered people and is now using this information to take them out. And Serena has convinced everybody that Eli is a good dude because she can make you believe things. And Sydney's power is raising people from the dead, but she doesn't just raise people from the dead, she can also raise animals from the dead. So at one point there's a dog her and Victor find, and Victor shoots it, but then to put it out of its like misery and pain, but then she brings it back to life and it's no longer in pain, I guess. So the dog does make it out of alive in the end, and it is in the next book, but Eli does shoot and kill Sydney's dog. That poor dog goes through everything. Victor kills Serena. Now, Sydney does not know that this happened, but they had to take out Serena because in the end, she's gonna kill Sydney. Like, she's gonna end up, I mean, she did like let her go when she met back up with her, but she really believes, similarly to Eli, that these superpowered people are like abominations. Serena was such a good character. So like, it was heartbreaking. It was sad. I kept wishing that she like would change her mind. Her manipulation of other people was, oh my gosh, so good. That's another thing that happened in Heroes that I really loved, because like, how do you fight somebody who can just like tell you what to do and you do it? Another example of this is, what is that guy that David Tennant played in Jessica Jones? Oh my God, what a scary ass villain. So that's one of the most like scary things that I could think of, is somebody having the power to manipulate you through their words. And like, you know, you could do like real good commentary on this, like the state of affairs with politics in the US right now, where it's like, you know, people are being manipulated with words, and you don't have to have the power to force them to believe something. You just say it and they just believe it. And this is kind of what Serena was doing, where she was telling the cops that were doing all this work for Eli is a hero, Eli Ever is a hero, and they believed her. And so he was running around just killing innocent people that had superpowers, and the cops were backing him, and he's just on a murder spree. But the cops are like, he's a hero, Serena told us so. In the end, Victor kills Serena, which I'm still kind of sad about. Like, she was a bad person, but I kind of wanted her to live. Sydney doesn't know about this, and you know that that's going to break Sydney's heart later when she finds out that Victor killed her sister Serena. And in the end, while Eli and Victor are fighting, Eli does stab Victor in the chest and he does die. But now that Serena's dead, there's nobody to tell the police that they have to carry out Eli's will. So when Eli says, you have to burn Victor's body, they're like, what's wrong with you? We're not doing that. So of course, Sydney brings Victor back to life. Now this has consequences later in the second book, come to find out. And speaking of consequences, Eli did get arrested and is in prison. Again, I still haven't seen him in the second book, but I'm really interested to see what happens with him. So much of this was so heartbreaking, particularly like the sister stuff. I hope my siblings don't watch my channel. I always kind of feel like ideology has also separated me in a way from my own siblings. And I often like wonder where the line would be, like if they would choose me over their ideas. And so watching that play out between Sydney and Serena, especially as the younger sibling, was really heartbreaking. So in the end, when, you know, Serena was like, I need to take out my sister, she's bad, she's super powered, and I feel that that's a violation. And then she lets her go. I cried. I was like, see, you do love her more than your ideology. And it was really fascinating watching the relationship between Eli and Serena, because he thinks that she's an abomination, vice versa, but they feel like they are sort of inevitable. So they're sort of in a relationship, but also they feel like each other is an abomination, which was so fascinating. I honestly was very sad when Serena died. Like, I knew it had to be done, but at the same time, I kind of wanted to see it play out a little further. So much of this talks about like loss and you know, what might have been and what could have been. And you think that you're gaining something through gaining a superpower, but a lot of this is about loss instead of gains. It was really painful. It was a really painful thing to watch happen to a lot of these people. And a lot of the superpowers were so fascinating. Some of them were like really beneficial to people's lives, but a lot of people were like really haunted by their power and really struggled. And I can't help but think but how realistic that is to, if this were to happen, how many people would not be able to live with these certain abilities that they had gained. I don't know that I could live with myself even if I had just Victor's power, like the ability to cause pain. I don't think that there's a situation that I would ever want to use that in. And what happens if I like sneeze and accidentally do it to somebody? Part of what I love about this book is its ability to really make you reflect and have like further conversations about like the implications of all of this if all of this were real. And that's really the sign of a good book. Well, it's one example of the sign of a sign of a good book. Let me know your thoughts on Vicious down below. Let me know if you struggled with the sequel. I know some people did not like it as much. So far, it's good. It's just it's not hitting quite the same. So let me know how you felt about books 1 and 2. Let me know if you think she's ever gonna come out with book 3. And thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye. And before I go, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Therapy Bills patrons, if I can get my microphone to work with me. And those are Alexander, Ashley H, Astra, Brittany Bobitney, Call Me Kodiak, Cami, Choco's Traumatized by That Dang Book, Chris the Horror Therapist, DJ Rocktopus, Ellie, Emerald Dodge, Aaron with 2 E's, Eric, Jess, John E, Kay, Kalei no K, Casey McKenzie, Kate W, Katie, Quinn, Lady Kittybug, Lady Chips, Lauren K, Lemon Jelly, Lex, Lily B, Max B, Mixer Boneless, Alice, Panoramic Demon, Peggy Lou, Rain, Reese, SJ, Samar, Scarlet, Shiny, SMK, Spoopy, Steph B, T Delegati, 2 Orbit, Umami Mommy, Urchin Audrey, White Raven 13, and Zorvictia. Thank you all so much for being here and for being a friend. And last but not least, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my potato starch Marxists, and those are AB Daniels, Anaki, Alejandra, Ali Alicia, Alistair, Althea, Amanda D, Andy, Angelica, Armadildo, Hardy the Ninth, Ava, Ballads and Bookends, Beck, Blythe, Bookish Brainrot, Bookish by Jenna, Bree, Kate B, Caitlin P, Carlin, Carly, Casper, Kate W, Catherine, Kathy, Claire Online, Colleen, Corwin, Cosmic, Darius, Danielle, Darren, Desiree Michelle, Dilf Enthusiast, Dorian, Dorothea, Drive By Thinker, Ebby, Emily A, Emma, Other Emma, Ezra Moon, Fiona, Forever a Boat, Francis, Gadarn, Halia Artisan, Hannah C, Harpy Kuro, JM Tennant, Jay is on Olympus, Jelly V, Jen Michelle, Gender Queer, Jenny G, Jessa Sue, Jill, Jojo Bookish, Juicy Wizard, Catherine, Katie L, Katrina, Kaylee C, Kayala, Kendra, KMTV, Laughing Cat Dog, Lauren, Lazarus Ray, Library of Scars, Lindsay M, Lisa B, Lisa L, LP, Lou Siri, Lustful Octopus, Martin, Maddie, Madison, Man-Eating Plant, Megan, Malara, May, Mima Who, Molly, Never, Nicole G, Nicole R, Nyan Binary, Paige P, Paul, Penelope, Penny Chilling, Foxglove, Plague Carrier, Queen Cereal, Rachel B, Reba, Rebecca, Rebecca R, Ronnie, Rosie Thorns, Rowan, Secoria, Sadie Selby, Saintbringer, Sakia Lume, Sarah H, Sarah the Bear, Shamed, Shannon, Sean, Sophie, Stardust, Talia, That Nerdy Mystic, Tiana, Too Thick to Work Today, Trash Can Teddy, Triple M, Taito Phoenix, Unicorn Jenny, Wobbs, and Writer A. Thank you so much for being here and for being a friend.